the things that are completely illogical, listening and taking those things seriously goes a long way towards building a good relationship with your principal or your client and forming trust.
Welcome to the Private Chef podcast, serving the 1%. I'm your host, Hannes Henche, and on our show we speak to the best chefs, how they honed in on their skills to excel in the industry, and what it takes to work as a private chef for some of the most exclusive clients in the world. Hi everybody, welcome back to the Private Chef podcast. My name is Hannes Henche, and we're exploring the journeys of private industry professionals. Today I'm thrilled to welcome Chef Zane Rosel to the show. He spent over 2 decades as a culinary expert and passionate food lover. He also worked in some of the most prestigious kitchens in the UK, for example, as the executive private chef, cooking for the Duchess and Duke of Marlborough at Blenheim Palace. Now he's enjoying passing along his culinary expertise by teaching young chefs worldwide and becoming a curriculum writer at William Anglis Institute. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, Hannes. It's great. Thank you.
So, where does your original love for food comes from?
Always loved food. I did not have a mother or grandmother who I cooked with. My mother did not cook, and I was jealous of the kids who came to school with the treats their mum had made them. So I started cooking out of the Australian 1975 Woman's Weekly Cookbook, trying to make myself my own treats. And I enjoyed cooking. I enjoyed arranging food. I used to make fruit platters for my family without any inclination that could be a potential career. So when I left school, I attended university and studied a degree in journalism, and soon realized that journalism was not for me. And I was working in a seafood restaurant as a kitchen hand, started taking on more and more cooking duties, and I started liking the look of what the chefs were doing, and I dropped out of uni to my mother's disgust, and I took a chef's apprenticeship, and the chef happily took me on. Hard to believe, but he made me cut my hair to get the apprenticeship because I was a long-haired rock star. And that was that. I loved it. It's 27 years ago, but everything about it just completely and utterly took over. I read books. I came home at night. I cooked after work. Yeah, it just became...
And the hair never came back?
It became an obsession. Clearly, yeah. Yes, it was once
That's
beautiful.
Such a commitment to cut your hair.
Oh. But, it had such a strong effect on me that the first ever job on my first day of my apprenticeship was to make the bread. And I had no idea about making bread. I didn't go to culinary school or have anything like that. And I remember smelling the yeast in the warm water. And throughout my career, no matter how, even recently, every now and again, if I'm tired, I'm making bread in the morning. I smell that yeast and it takes me right back to being that little kid on the first day, smelling the yeast and feeling that, that mixture of excitement and a little bit of fear. So the joy hasn't left.
Yeah, that's awesome. I actually have a similar memory. I remember one of the early days when I was working in Munich. I was walking past a salamander that where they were trying tomatoes with thyme and garlic underneath, and you could just smell it so distinctly every time I walked past it. And it's like burned into my memory, that particular moment of me passing it by and just being caught by the sense of it.
Yeah, it became a memory for you. Yeah, lovely those moments, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. So then,
So,
how long did you cook with that particular chef, and how did the journey go on?
well, this was in North Queensland, Australia, which is a very exotic destination environmentally. Fabulous, beautiful. But on a cultural and culinary level, less so. So I worked in a city called Townsville, which is in the far north of Queensland. Not terribly renowned for gastronomy, but I believe I was fortunate enough to work in an age and an environment where everything was from scratch. It was just a big old seafood restaurant. It had no pretensions. It was a lovely restaurant, certainly not at the cutting edge of cuisine. But as I said, the bread was made, the sauces were made from scratch. There was a lot of a la menu pan work, there was still a fish meunier, and I believe they're great skills to cook a perfect fish meunier for 120 covers. I think that's a very, very skillful thing to be able to do consistently. So I stayed there for I think 18 months, and then I went to work for a relatively famous French gentleman. He'd had a Michelin star in Burgundy. He was a bit of a local celebrity, but he taught me the real basic fundamentals of French cuisine, and that my love for that grew. And it was just that the paradox of growing up somewhere that many people would consider exotic, like North Queensland. For me, I was obsessed with the exotic Europe. The ingredients that I would read in the cookbooks of Europe and the great UK chefs, Nico Leidenes, Fred Pierre Kaufman, the chefs of that generation. That really fueled me. And so, I learned to make Thai red curry paste from scratch, and there was wonderful Southeast Asian produce, but I've been always fueled by the desire to go to Europe. So my career then
is that the grass is really always greener somewhere, right? It's
always, and it still is, Hannes. It still is, yeah. I think because wasn't really a great culinary destination, I became a head chef very young because I took it so seriously. I was so committed. I loved it so much that I rose quite quickly, and I became a head chef far too quickly, and I fell out of love with it a little bit. Too much pressure, too young. And I was really just waiting to get to Europe, and finally achieved that in 2003. And, along the way, although I hadn't worked anywhere particularly notably in North Queensland, I was very fortunate to work with some really notable chefs. For me, a wonderful Swiss gentleman who I worked for many years, and a fantastic English guy who'd worked at Le Gavroche and with Rick Stein. And their stories really gave me a lot of dreams and aspirations, and they gave me a little bit of a pathway and a goal that I might like to follow one day. So,
did you ever wanted to have your own restaurant?
I headed to England. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I did. Absolutely. But I felt that because I'd become a young chef, a head chef so young, I didn't feel very confident in myself and my skills, my chops. I felt a little bit of a fake because, I won a few awards. I don't know how. I won a few best restaurant awards. But I didn't feel like a complete chef. It's like, yeah, great, wonderful. But the thing with Australian restaurants, you got highest minimum wage in the world. You don't have a great deal of staff. Standards are not perhaps what they are in other parts of the world, particularly Europe. And I found that restaurateurs and chefs were more interested in creating dazzling, miraculous menus filled with, things from all around the world. Let's see how many wonderful ingredients we can possibly arrange in one dish. We create an amazing sounding menu, but there's little thought into how we can practically produce that successfully every day. So standards, imagination and creativity, wonderful. Ingredients, wonderful. Standards, not so crash hot. So,
execution, questionable.
Questionable, yes. Perhaps one day a sensational meal, and then 3 days later, perhaps not so sensational. Yeah. I had one boss, wonderful guy, I loved him to bits, but he would create menus by sort of magpieing various things from magazines and cookbooks, and then a bit like taking a dart and throwing it at a dartboard and, oh yeah, that sounds good. We'll do that.
And we mix it with this.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be fine. Yeah. So in 2003, yes, I went to London, and my girlfriend at the time, who was a chef, she tagged along, and we both went to London. And I actually did a day's trial at Gordon Ramsay's 3 Michelin star on Royal Hospital Road. I think I did a 16-hour trial.
And you loved it?
And no, I didn't love it because no offense. I mean, amazing, tremendous place. It just wasn't right for me at the time, and I felt there was a lot of negativity between the chefs. There was no camaraderie. There was bickering. There was, I know. It's a 3 Michelin star is not a holiday camp, but I'm a food lover, and all I saw was a bunch of kids who had skin disorders who were yelling at each other without any sort of teamwork or camaraderie, and I just didn't feel it. So I spent 6 months in London drinking and partying, and then my wife and I went down to Cornwall, where my very good friend that I had worked with in Cairns, he said, if you ever go to Cornwall, I'll look after you with jobs. So my wife and I went to Cornwall. He got my wife a job with Rick Stein. I'm not sure if all your viewers would know of Rick Stein. He's a very famous English seafood chef, has been for several decades now. And he got me a job in a small little Michelin star restaurant. And yeah, my job, best job of my life. It was just beautiful. It just really, it was all the things that I'd wanted. I got to cook all the things I wanted. Ironically, I thought that being a Michelin star that I would be having a hard time. But it was my poor little wife at Rick Stein's who had the hard time. It was, she really, yeah, she copped it. A very busy, amazing institution, incredibly busy, incredible food, but she copped it. And meanwhile, while I was working for 15 hours a day, sure, it was in a wonderful, supportive environment and a calm little restaurant, and produce was incredible. The love for food was incredible. And yeah, it was just beautiful, man. The dishes sounded incredibly simple, like it wouldn't work in an Australian restaurant. It sounds too basic, but the standards were so meticulous and so high that I just thought, this is the best thing ever. And it was hyper-local before hyper-local was a trend, because it was common sense.
Yep.
It was a small little village, got some potatoes from the old guy down the road, got the fish from the local, the day boats. And I just thought, this is amazing. The ingredients are just incredible. We didn't prep herbs before service. We might pick the herbs before service, but you chop the herbs to order, and the dishes would be really simple. Might sound boring, but because the standards were so high, every day I finished work, most days, I felt very, very proud, and I felt good about myself. And I just thought, this is where it's at. So for me, that was the big awakening. And I thought, this is where I want to be. And yeah, the respect for produce, I always remember seeing the boss. She never cooked again.
She was like on the opposite. No, she never cooked again.
Yeah, she came to work with me at this restaurant a couple of years later, but I think it took a bit of the joy out for her. She saw Rick Stein on TV, who was an amazing guy, an amazing chef. Love him to bits, but she was seduced by his TV persona, and we were young, she quite naively thought that that's what his restaurant would be like. But of course, a business, a multi-level business like that, it's not about Uncle Rick being sweet and lovely in the kitchen. It was a very hard kitchen, and you know the type. Yeah. This could be a long story, Hannes. I don't want to talk too much about myself.
No, it's fine. I find it interesting because you're going into, finding what really resonates with you. And I think that's a hard part of life for pretty much anybody. You immediately knew going into Gordon Ramsay, like, wait. Let me back up here. There's a lot of fame around this environment, but this doesn't hit home for me. And, and then you kind of follow follow your own path, your own journey, and you're hitting home in that smaller restaurant, where there is a very nurturing and supportive environment, where the produce and everything hits home for you, and you're like, hey, kind of going away from you originally what you're doing in Australia, you're simplifying the overall dish, but you're really working on the craftsmanship on it, and really honing it in on a quality level, from where the produce comes from, what products you pick, to the skills being applied to every single plate. And I think this is such a big part of every chef's journey, to first of all
you're right. Yeah.
see that simple dishes can be amazing, and executed well beats complexity out of fanciness all the time, in my opinion. And I think the other part is finding that sense of, this is where I belong, this is what the environment I want to thrive in, because I think especially when we're young, we just don't know different. And I'm like, okay, I guess that's how it is. It's just gonna be the kind of shit show, maybe like at Gordon Ramsay. And for me, the first kitchen I stepped into was just like that. It was a nightmare. It was a very unsupportive environment. A lot of screaming and ego. There was like literally physical violence, and I just didn't know different. And people were like, "Why are you still working here?" Because I was one of the longest employees there, and I'm like, I just don't know different.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. It's illogical, isn't it? But it's true. The first kitchen I worked in, the first chefs, they were quite aggressive. They were like rock stars. They were so egotistical, and they were good to me. So I'm not being negative about them, but they weren't great role models. They seemed to delight in making waitresses cry, and their ego was rampant, and very aggressive. And I'm embarrassed to say that I took a bit of that on, because I thought that's what you do. And I was only 18 or 19, and I remember very clearly going to probably the best restaurant I'd worked at that point, a few years later, relatively for North Queensland. We're not talking Michelin star here, but we're talking somewhere that produced some good dishes, and it was a lovely restaurant. And the chef, he looked like he looked like a hippie from Woodstock, and I'm generalizing, but but the thing was, he didn't yell, he didn't scream, he didn't change. And I started thinking to myself, who's the tougher person here? Because the chefs that are yelling, more often than not, I believe they're yelling out of anxiety, and it comes out as anger, because that's how their stress comes out. And I was looking at this hippie dude and thought, wow, you're not reacting. You're just being cool the entire time. And I thought, wow, that takes a lot more toughness than having tantrums and smashing things and belittling people. And I vividly remember one evening I kicked a fridge door, and he didn't yell at me. He just looked at me and said, "Don't do that. You look like an idiot." And that cut me worse than any bollocking or throwing something at me ever could. And basically, from my time spent with that chap, I'm like, okay, no, I'm going to model myself on this man, because this man has good dignity, good values, and if he can be calm amid the chaos, he's exhibiting greater strength than the prats who are throwing tantrums and showing off and behaving like toddlers. So the people that you meet along the way, 100%. You take these good things, and hopefully you build something good about yourself,
Yeah. I think that's also a metaphor for life. It's not only in the kitchen. I think that the calm person, the the calm person wins any day of the week. It's the people that lose their calm, that let anger and anxiety ride them, that have bad judgment and lose the sense of clarity. And it's those individuals that kind of in the midst of the storm remain calm, like maybe the center of the storm, that I would say, that's admirable.
Yes, 100% agree. That's the behavior you want to encourage. And, jumping fast forward briefly into my role as an educator, I like to talk about that, just emphasizing chefs yelling, they're not tough, they're afraid, or they're scared, or they're stressed. They're showing off. This is not cool behavior. This is not tough, admirable, and this will not get you anywhere in life. The tough guy is the cool guy. Think about the Westerns, man. Don't give anything away. Keep yourself in check. Be calm and make good decisions. I think talking about the mental health of young chefs and trying to be happy is an important aspect to being an educator, not just teaching them how to make a beurre blanc. It's trying to teach them how to be happy chefs and how to have a happy industry. But yeah, I jump forward.
Yes, I like
that. We
can go back. You skipped the large chunk
that
in there.
Calmness. we skipped 20 years, but yeah. The calmness is as well. That's a massive attribute for being a private chef, isn't it? I mean,
100%.
That sort of behavior is the behavior that private clients are wary of, and there's certainly no place for anything like that behavior when you're in someone's home. So that's a trait that is essential, I believe, in a private chef. Particularly, you may be
I think
faced
there is
with
absolutely there is no place for being anxious or scared or loud or having a big ego, in a private environment. You definitely only will have appreciation if you're able to remain calm and cool and keep your chill, and you're never part of the problem, always part of the solution.
Yeah, good words. Yeah, although I would say I've had plenty of anxiety. It's just a matter of how.
I mean,
how
you just can't show it. You just.
The anxiety is yours. It's not someone else's problem. It's your problem to deal with in a way that is good for you and does not affect anyone else around you. It's there. It's real. I can't.
Yeah.
I've had moments. My gosh.
So what are some of the moments of anxiety in the life of a private chef?
Well, the usual, the unexpected lunch for 20 people that you weren't told about 10 minutes before lunch. Yeah, of course. I mean, what private chef hasn't experienced that? Yeah, and then getting looked at like you're the idiot for not having been aware of that, and a menu done up, and that's where the poker face comes in, and you say, yes, no problem, madame. Right on it, madame. No problem. And then you walk away, and maybe you kick something when no one's looking, but then you keep that smile on, you keep calm, and you deal with it. Yeah, I didn't. I mean,
You just suck it up.
yeah, it doesn't. You just need to have that facade of calmness, no matter what's happening inside. Oh, there's 100 booked. Of course, Your Grace. No problem. Thank you. And then you run off and panic and swear and then have a 5-minute tantrum, and then you deal with it. But I think that's part of it that I quite liked. That was the element that I liked about it a bit. I like being put on the spot and opening the fridge and thinking, holy, what am I going to do with this? I loved that. I thrived off that. That was something that gave me a buzz. I think.
I have like split feelings about that. When those moments when you see the cars pulling up in the front and you're like, wait, did I miss something? Anybody didn't tell me about something? And then you start checking your fridge and you're just trying to gather information. Are we having a full-blown lunch? How many courses do we need? How many people do we have?
Yes.
Is the security eating too?
Yes, we're laughing now. Yeah. You have to prepare for war. Sometimes when I worked for a private family, occasionally I would get questioned as to why there was certain ingredients in the fridge, and I would come up with a story, or I would humbly say that I had over-ordered, but in reality it was making sure that I had little plans ready just in case for the last minute unannounced business lunch for 12 people. It was like I had to be ready for anything. So, as you know, yeah. I liked it though. I enjoyed being a private chef. I was probably So
it's so funny how I can relate to it. Like I always try to have a stash of a couple proteins and things just in case. I'm like, if something here changes, I at least want to be able to fall back on something. Having a little bit of lobster, having a couple scallops, having some fish, having some tenderloin goes a long way in those moments.
Always, you must be prepared. You've got to be prepared for anything. It's guerrilla warfare, and you must be ready.
So, what was your angle into your first private chef position?
Okay, so we're going all over the timeline, so I hope the listeners can keep track. We'll go back to my first job.
I think it's still relatable and fun for everybody.
We'll go back to 2003 now, Hannes. So my wife and I did what most Aussies do, is you get a 2-year working holiday visa, and you go work at your Michelin star restaurant, and then you go back to Australia and get on with your life. And that's what I thought I was going to do. So after I'd spent, I think it was 15 months working at the little restaurant that I was at, I started thinking about a private house experience due to some of my mentors who had filled me with these amazing stories of working in yachts in the 80s, and my particular beautiful Swiss chef who'd been a private chef, and very humble, wonderful guy, but he told me so many amazing stories, and I would listen and just think, wow, what experiences, how cool. I want some of that. So I found a little agency in the UK, and so I thought, okay, I'm coming to the end of my time at the restaurant in the UK. Let's go do a private job somewhere before we go back to Australia. And it was a job to work in the Hamptons, Long Island, for summer. It was a 7-week job for a large family. And I just thought they weren't looking for chefs per se. They were more looking for just a couple of cooks. But I realized that if I was going to get into the private industry, it's one of those typical situations where you won't get employed unless you've got experience in a private house. But how do you get experience in a private house? So you go in low. So my wife and I went in low just to get the experience. I mean, I didn't care. Let's go to the Hamptons. Great. And it was just such a wonderful experience. And this particular family, a very large extended family, just wonderful people, very, very, very well connected, great role models. And they took my wife and I under their wing. And, you know, we're just dumb little Aussies and they were very caring, patient and compassionate with us. And so they flew us to New York and got a taxi ride to an apartment, the Upper East Side, Manhattan. And wonderful old style apartment. And we got to the apartment and realized that there was no one there. And they had entrusted us to go to one of their family homes. And there was a note on our bed and it said, welcome to Manhattan. Here's $200 for some fun. We'll see you in 3 days.
Wow.
Enjoy New York. Like, oh, wow, isn't that? And we was like, wow. We were walking around their apartment and I'm seeing photos of them with some very notable famous people and such a beautiful old world place. And I thought, how incredible that they've entrusted us to stay at their house. And yeah, that was quite special. And being in the Upper East Side of Manhattan, for me, first time, wow, amazing. And yeah, so after a few days, we took a bus out to Long Island. We're in the Hamptons, and the house was like something out of a fairy tale. It had a 100-meter long driveway, and it backed onto a private lake. Fabulous. The family was so friendly, so welcoming, and so it was just my wife and I, and we cooked Mediterranean-style food every day. Sometimes we'd get a night off and we'd go have some burgers in town, you know, but it was just, and the guests who came were ridiculous. Oh my God, who are these people? It was very casual and all family style, so no plated food, just lots of vegetables, lots of clean food, simple grilled meats with lots of vegetable salads, typical summer type Mediterranean food. And so we did that for 6 weeks. And I was just blown away just about the experience and how beautiful everything was. And yeah, after that, we went back to Australia. And you know what? I got back and I thought, I'm missing out on stuff here. Stuff this 2 years and come back to Australia. So I felt like, you know, Australia is it's a beautiful place and many people desire to come here. So I don't want to sound ungrateful or petulant, but I sort of felt like Australia was a wonderful retirement home. It's beautiful and sunny and lovely. that there was all these exciting, amazing experiences to be had on the other side of the world. And I thought, I want some of that. So after being back in Australia for a few months, we contacted the people that I worked for in New York and said, do you mind would you like us to come back next year? So that's what we did. And we went back to New York and did another summer. Same thing, wonderful experience. And at the end of that summer, the family members who had employed us, they asked us where we'd like to go, what we were doing. And we said, well, we'd like to go back to Cornwall because we loved Cornwall. And they asked us, where are you going to stay? And I said, well, I don't know, to be honest, because Cornwall isn't very, there's no accommodation. It's full of second homeowners. It's very hard to find a place to live. And they said, well, we have a house in Cornwall. Perhaps you could stay there while you look for somewhere. And I thought, wow, it's amazing. Oh, we said, thank you so much. That's really kind of you. And so we flew back to England and we got taken to their holiday home, and it was a incredible large heritage building perched on the top of a cliff on a private bay. Just breathtaking. And my word, we were right above a cliff, in one of the most beautiful parts of the world. And wow. And it was, coincidentally, it was just up the road from the little Michelin star restaurant I used to work at. So I got my job back there. I continued working there. And the couple who owned the property would come down on a weekend every now and again, and we would just look after them. We'd cook for them maybe, and we looked after the property. It was a pretty big place. So it became, after a month, they said, how would you like this to become more permanent? We said, okay, sure. And so, my wife and I became private caretakers for their property. They were based in London. If they came down, we looked after them. If there was a problem with the house, we looked after it. But I was able to still work full time. And this is one of the things that I advocate for being a private chef, is that how incredible. I mean, I felt so blessed and just so lucky that there we were in this amazing location, an amazing house. And every day I felt grateful. And every day since, I feel grateful for that experience. And I learnt so much from this particular couple, their kindness and generosity with their time. Met some amazing people along the way. So we continued that arrangement for, it was 4 years. We'd go to New York. Once we went to New York to cook Thanksgiving. Sometimes we'd, do some private work for the family in London, but that was our introduction into private work. And it just came about just by accepting a job that was below our standards, just to earn trust and show that you have the personality to work within a private household. And I guess that's really the way into it, I believe. I mean, you can have all the Michelin stars on your CV, but that does not qualify you to be a good home cook. And without any disrespect to a chef who has 3 Michelin star restaurants on their CV, because I could not do that. I'm not that good a chef. But it doesn't mean you can make a good cottage pie. And it doesn't mean that you're happy to make a good cottage pie or a ham sandwich or peanut butter on toast. So
Yeah.
yeah, if anyone's interested in how to get involved in it, there's loads of summer jobs in Europe. I'm saying things that you obviously know, but just take a job with a family who's going to spend a month in France or Spain, and just cook for them and see how you go working with the family, how you relate. Are you happy making cheese on toast for the kids? You know, are you happy getting told maybe that certain classic combinations don't go together? Like, you know, steak and béarnaise is not a good combination. Yes, my mistake. Sorry. Yeah. And if you can prove that if you can just get one good reference that you can conduct yourself in a friendly, professional manner in someone's home, then I think that's a big step. And you maybe have to, if you do have an ego, put it aside for a little while and make some cottage pies and deal with it. So yeah.
100%.
That's my advice for getting in. Go in low and work your way up. I know that's common sense, but yeah.
Well, I think with the private world, sometimes it seems to be so enticing to go in high, because that's where the really high salaries loom, you know, and then it's like, well, the thing is, you won't get the attention of the agencies if you don't have the trust of previous private clients, you know, and you know, once you're at that level, you're easy to place because you have it on your track record, you have it in you, you've proven that you're a personality that can work in a team and in a household. And that's like the hardest part, no matter how good your skill set in the kitchen is. If you're not trustworthy, or you know, if you're not that calm person that people appreciate to be around, easy to be around, you know, with a service attitude, it doesn't matter how good of a chef you are. You're not going to thrive in a private household.
Not one bit. It takes a certain personality, doesn't it? And there's other things that I think that go along with it, is that not all chefs are going to be able to be well spoken, but it's something you've got to work on, I believe, is that your presentation, your demeanor, that may sound insulting to a chef who comes from an incredible pedigree, and full kudos to those people, my utmost admiration. But this is a different ball game, and not just cooking wise, but the way you present yourself, the way you speak. These things, I think, need to be, if you're lacking in that, you need to try and work on that. You need to learn to listen, how to act with these people, speak clearly, not speak too much. There's a whole load of other tools that are going to make you a better private chef. Listening, not talking too much, speaking well, speaking clearly, not talking about what you've done, what you're going to do. So there's a lot of other things to learn, I think, to be a really good private chef, and it's outside of cooking. It's personal development needed to really excel.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about that. I feel like the people that work in households, especially over many decades, there is so much personal development and humbleness, you know, that someone needs to achieve within themselves to be like to actually just suck it up and but without losing self-respect as such. It's a tremendous step in personal development, I would say.
I completely agree with what you're saying. It's I don't know how to describe. You do need to reach a level of some sort of zenness and acceptance where you can be confident enough in your abilities and be calm, happy to accept sometimes completely and utterly illogical, irrational, ridiculous criticism, because what some chefs must understand is that perhaps if you're working for a private family, an ultra high net worth family, is perhaps, well, they've never been employers. They don't go to management school. They don't have KPIs. They don't have anyone appraising their behavior or their performance. They don't have anyone or any experience in managing someone, which is not their fault. But at the end of the day, they're your employer. And sometimes they may say illogical things and they may behave in completely and utterly illogical ways. And you've got to be in a good place within yourself to accept it and not be downtrodden and beat yourself up. It's a fine line, isn't it? You're being calm, confident, just being, yes, it's okay.
Yeah. And in return, that's part of their personal development journey. And I've seen some families being very, very aware of what makes a good household team and, how to treat them and not being overly illogical, because there is a fine line where it comes to a point where the team is like, okay, I just can't care about your crazy requests anymore. And that's when I've seen people trying to overpay for positions. And then because there's a large amount of money on the table, they will do it for some time. But at the end of the day, you won't reach longevity in your team, and you won't. So there's households where I've seen them riding that line very nicely, where they can nurture the team, but still kind of get out of the team what they want, but reach a really good level of longevity. And I would say that if it becomes too crazy, it generally has two outcomes. There needs to be a high pay on the table, and there's a little longevity in the team.
Yeah, the high pay may attract the staff, but it does not keep the staff.
Yeah,
I don't believe. No. So.
Yeah, and I think
it
keeps the wrong. It keeps people for the wrong reasons. If it's just for the high pay, it's people that have debt. It's people that have another motive other than cooking great and being of service. And I think that's why even from a family perspective, it helps to start reflecting on how did my actions affect my team. Because I think for a family more so, it's actually desirable to get to a point where there is longevity. Because I think there's nothing like working with a well-oiled machine, with a team that puts their heart in. And I think the same is true on the receiving end as a family, as a client. It's like, imagine how beautiful it is to work with a team where everybody has been there for a decade and more, and they know exactly what you like and what you don't like and where to put things. And, everybody's well tuned in over having to retrain everybody every 18 months because, maybe they paid off their student debt and they're ready to go to someone else who nurtures them differently or is less illogical?
Illogical, yeah. You understand this game well, Hans, I believe. Yeah.
Well, I've played it. Or I've been played, maybe.
Maybe a bit of both. Yeah. So I guess I'll. If we talk about challenges, I won't talk about my career overly so much more than I have. I don't want to bore people, of course. When my journey from Cornwall, the restaurant I worked at, I was there for another few years. And then my wife and we opened our own restaurant for 4 years. So my association with the family I worked with came to an end because owning a restaurant is all encompassing, and that's that. So my wife and I had a tiny little 20-seat restaurant, and it was wonderful. I loved it. Menu changed every day. I did as much from scratch as possible every day. We made 3 types of bread every day. It's joyful. Didn't make much money, but I loved it. And after 3 years, my landlord said, "I want the restaurant back." So I said, "Okay, could you give me another year?" And he gave me another year, and so we had 4 very happy years, and obviously a massive amount of work. But the reason for my wife and I into re-looking at going into private work after our restaurant was that we suddenly came to the conclusion that without a restaurant, we might as well have a family. Because prior to this, we thought, we're hospitality people. We're going to travel, eat and drink wine for the rest of our lives and have a jolly good time. And which sounds quite good. But we thought, you know what? Let's try and have a kid. And I didn't want to be a dad who was trying to run a restaurant at that level and have a child. I didn't want to work 15 hours a day and be that. So I thought, let's try and get back into private household work, because it's the only opportunity for me to earn a decent living and not be involved in a restaurant. So that was our decision, and that led us to London, where my wife worked for a lovely family in London as a housekeeper cook, and I worked for a family in Eaton Square in London, and I think that was very challenging. That was one of the most challenging times of my career, and I talk about that because it brings up potential issues that you may have as a private chef with communication and with other staff members. So I'm not an egotistical person by any means. I'm probably more self-deprecating and self-doubting than anything. But I've never really had too many issues with people criticizing my food. I'm not the greatest technician. If I'd have been more consistent and more able to focus on creating consistent dishes every day, I probably would have done better. But I'm a little bit flighty, and I change the damn menu every day, and I would always be experimenting, which are perhaps not the best qualities at a Michelin level. So, however, those qualities of being creative and being able to change menus at the drop of a hat are quite transferable to the private industry. But my role in London, I was faced with criticism of my food in a way that I'd never experienced before. And the reason at the time was I did not have a direct relationship with the principals. The gentleman of the house was typically away for most of the week, and it was the lady of the house and her 3 children were the people I primarily cooked for. And it was very upstairs, downstairs. I had a beautiful commercial kitchen, but I did not speak to Madame. I was a little intimidated by her when I first got there. I was, oh my gosh, I was a little bit scared talking to her. And I didn't really go upstairs. So my relationship was through the butler. Now, the butler and I got along very well on a personal level, but the butler and the principals did not get along so well, which caused me several months of complete and utter heartache and unnecessary pain because of lack of communication, poor communication. He was guiding me as to what I should be cooking, and he wasn't really giving me much feedback. And for the first time in my career, I just felt very nervous. I thought, I'd never thought about losing a job before, but at this point in time, I actually thought about I might be losing a job. And I was trying to cook for the kids, and I was saying to the butler, what is it they like? And he said, oh, chef, schnitzels, just normal type stuff. And I remember I did a veal cordon bleu. And I thought, gosh, what kid's not going to like a veal cordon bleu? Well, they didn't like it. I got hauled upstairs, and Madame said, what is this? We cannot eat this. And I had never in my career had I heard anything like that. I'm not saying I'm a great chef, but I'm a decent cook. Never in my days had I been made to. I was walking home just going, oh, what's wrong? Then they told me that I couldn't cook fish properly. And I thought, oh my gosh, okay. So Madame would love to eat sea bass. And I kept getting told the sea bass skin was not crispy enough. And I thought, jeepers, I've just been cooking sea bass for 8 years in Cornwall. I thought I was all right at that. And every day, or every second or third day, there I am. I'm just making sure it is the most even, beautifully brown, straight, crisp skin you've ever seen. And it keeps coming back. Not right, chef. Not good. Oh my God. I'm cooking it skin side down for 6 minutes. Flip it. Just a little bit of heat on the underside, on the flesh. Just cooked. No good. Then eventually, the ultimate humiliation is the butler says, I've been instructed to teach you how to cook fish, chef. I said, sure, okay. So the butler puts on the pan. He picks up the piece of sea bass, and rather than put it skin side down, he puts it flesh side down, cooks the entire thing on the flesh side, and then leaves the skin almost untouched and soggy. And he said, that's how you do it, chef. Right. Okay. So you don't cook the skin, you brown the flesh, and they don't eat the skin. And he said, yes. Yeah. Yeah, utterly ridiculous story, yes. But yeah, that's no. I was flabbergasted, utterly flabbergasted. And so, okay. Yep. And I soon realized that the butler and the principals perhaps did not have the best relationship. I mean, my trial for them should have been the best indication, because I took the train to London for the trial and was told that I would cook a traditional English Sunday roast. Sure, no problem. And at 10:30 that night before the trial, the butler texted me and said, "Madame does not want a Sunday roast. She wants something interesting." I said, okay, well, there goes the menu out the door. So for my trial, I walked in at 9 o'clock in the morning and just opened the fridges and just went, let's go. So I can't remember what I cooked, but I cooked about 7 different dishes just from what they had lying around in the fridge. And then I got told I had the job. That was around 2 o'clock, and I think I sat there till about 9:30 that evening waiting to speak to them. So probably at that point in time, I should have realized that there was a bit of a communication issue with the staff. So the turning point came when I realized, okay, this isn't working. I don't believe this is necessarily my fault. What am I going to do? And the turning point came on a day when the family were booked to go to lunch at Nobu. And I thought, okay, they're going to Nobu, right? And then, of course, at the last minute, they cancelled. And they said, we want you to cook us lunch now, chef. And I said to the butler, well, I'm going to cook something from Nobu, okay, something along those lines. And he thought that I was being ridiculous. He said, I'm not so sure about that. And I just thought, well, nothing's really working that you've suggested. And I've got nothing really left to lose right now. So I'm just going to cook something that's inspired by the idea of Nobu. And yeah, so I just did like some tuna tataki and a soba noodle salad, and just, it's not my expertise, and you know what? I cooked that meal, and the boss called me upstairs and he said, "Chef, this is perfect. We love this. This is excellent. I'm happy with all of this. Thank you." And that sort of like turning point. Okay, I love the butler, great guy, no problem with him whatsoever. But then I started thinking, okay, how am I going to make these people happy? So I started talking to the PA. She was super helpful, and I just tracked, where do these people eat? What restaurants do they go to? Because if you can't communicate too directly, I'm going to have to find out in other means. So building that relationship with the broader team, I started following my intuition and my gut. And basically from then on, it was all good. You know, they had some tough expectations, and that's cool. But basically from then on, it was all good. And I just made sure that I kept a note of what they were. I had to be a bit more secret squirrel, because the butler didn't really give me much information. He wasn't one of these people who would say, "Oh, they love that chef." I thought, well, this is how we work as a team. This is how we make people happy. I'm not looking for you to tell me that they loved their meal because I need my ego stroked. I'm looking for you to tell me so we can build a repertoire of flavor profiles and successful dishes. And it's that teamwork and communication that you've got to work with your butler or your front of house or whatever that may be, because everyone will be happy then. I'm not a recipe database type of guy, but flavor profiles. It's so important for that communication and a good relationship between all the staff for everyone to be happy. So yeah, that was a good turning point for me, and it was a satisfying turning point that I managed to go from feeling utterly rubbish about myself to turning it around, and I moved on for financial reasons because my wife ended up we had a child and I could no longer afford to live in London the way I wanted to, but I maintained a good relationship with them and everything ended very well, and etc. So that's a win for me.
Yeah. And you just dropped such an important aspect of our job. It's first of all is where do we get our information from? And then, what's their relationship? It's so crucial. I've been in similar positions where, I was maybe fed information from the PA and it wasn't accurate to their palate. And then you're like cooking to that and like,
Yeah.
it's not really hitting the spot. I'm like, well, I'm doing exactly what I was told. And then, in that instance, I had another chef that they would use on an occasional basis. And he was like, oh, no, that's not how I'm doing it. I'm doing it like this. And I'm like, well, that's quite like opposite of what I was told. But I'm happy to go with that because that seems to be working, And that's so crucial to get those bits of information and try to gather it from the team. And I think going along those lines, like, hey, what are the restaurants you love to eat at? Because you get an idea about the flavor profiles. What are your favorite dishes at those restaurants? And if you have to, go to those restaurants and eat it, get an idea of what are they loving. Because it can be really tough when you don't hit the spot and the communication is off. And it's frustrating for both sides. Like it's not fun for them either to keep eating food that they don't want, and it's not fun for the chef to not hit the spot.
You're so right. I took that mentality. I at that point in time, I was saving to have a child, so I couldn't afford to go to Nobu, but I bought every Nobu cookbook and I just took it so seriously and like, okay, I may be an Australian chef and we're quite accustomed to using and abusing Asian ingredients, but predominantly I'm a French-trained, French-loved chef. So, but yeah, and one of the other challenging aspects of the job was Madame, who she was quite stern and she didn't give much away, but she was a good heart and very generous and kind to me. So although sometimes I would walk away feeling, oh my God, that was harsh, that was hard, very kind and generous to me in the end. So but she would eat fish and salad every day for lunch. Now, yes. So how does one make fish and salad exciting 7 days a week? Can be challenging. And I think that leads me to another point as a private chef, is that I think when you're a young chef or you're in the restaurant world, for me and a lot of the chefs I knew, you're prone to buying those big, beautiful coffee table books of the great chefs. You're looking at the latest trends, what's Noma doing, what's Pierre Gagne doing, and all of these beautiful, amazing books and techniques. And yeah, great, fantastic. But I think I believe you need to start transferring that to more humble cooking, cultural cooking, different cuisines. You're diversifying. You're not necessarily buying the latest Alain Ducasse book. So I started searching out books on Cambodian cuisine, those countries that Laos, all these countries that do amazing, interesting salads. I bought salad book after salad book just to try and it was great for me to expand my repertoire in a way that wasn't in that chefy Michelin World Best 50 Restaurant Award world. So it increased my cultural knowledge of the world. And for that, I found a great learning experience, and something that I would recommend any private chef to do is to start perhaps reading cookbooks that aren't by famous chefs.
Yep. Yeah, I think there's something to be said about that. That it's really good to have that diverse set of cuisines at hand. You know, where you can fall back on maybe different flavor profiles, but just at the same time, as you said earlier, you know, execute it well. It doesn't need to be fancy. It doesn't need to be an entire crazy amount of not recipes, but ingredients put together on a single plate. It's rather, you know, executed well in that regard. And I think that's truly where a great chef speaks for himself, is if you have the ability to transport those flavor profiles and put them on the plate, but in a solid way, well executed, you know. And I thought it's so funny what you said about the skin of the fish, because I've been in the exact same position where I was like, I don't know, from as far as I'm concerned, the fish is perfect, like it's nice and crispy, and then eventually you notice that they don't eat the skin. I'm like, that makes sense. Okay, you and it's so important to pick up on that and then pair that with your skill set and repertoire as a chef and understand what pleases them.
Yeah. And did you find you have to you adapt your palate as well between clients? I haven't done too many short-term jobs, whereas I found adapting my palate and cooking to the individual tastes, not just preference in cuisine, but the balance of the flavors. Say the house that I worked in London, and then later for the Duke of Roxburgh in Scotland, their palate, they tended to have a likeness for a little bit of sweetness in their dishes. And my palate started changing a little bit. I'm not a great lover of sweet too much. I'm more of a salt led by acid. Whereas I started noticing that, so my cuisine started becoming a little, trying to incorporate sweetness into my savory dishes. And then when I went to Blenheim Palace, the Duchess was acidic. She was an acid-led person. She found acidic citrus flavors that really appealed to her. And I had to completely change the flavor, and my palate had to readjust. And it's funny how obviously, you know, you're constantly tasting. And I found that my palate started getting a little bit sweet. So I had to then retrain my palate and adjust my cooking. Could be the exact same dish. Could be something really simple, like the old school, you know, like a fish with a sauce vierge. But they wanted the acid, and they're the things that you've got to adapt and change and listen to as well, don't you? It's really important you
know what's
adapt and you don't.
What's a great way to reset your palate from a physical standpoint for the body itself, and probably also to do with the brain, is a full water fast. Whether it's a single day or multiple days, after you go on a full fast, your palate is open for readjustment. And
right?
I think people are not aware how malleable the palate overall is, and how, as you said, you can adjust it, and then your personal palate became sweeter. And I think sometimes people think that the palate is static, but it's not at all. It's like you can go from being a roast lover to being a vegetable lover, and the palate evolves, and it's not static, it's malleable, and you can train it. And a great way to reset it is to have a continuous water fast, where you actually just drink water for a couple of days, and when you start eating, refeeding again, you can slowly introduce things, and it will be a completely different experience than having eaten it before the fast.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. That's really cool, though, Hannes. Okay.
Yeah.
When I look at it, I avoid ridiculous strong condiments, and I try and say to chefs, okay, yeah, when you're eating at home, don't put ketchup on everything. You're ruining your palate. And I'm such a typical chef dad. My little 8-year-old son. I limit his his ketchup intake because I tell him I don't want him to ruin his palate by constantly needing, over the top sweet and sour flavors for everything to taste good. I'm like, no, don't ruin your palate. You're too young. Typical chef dad stuff.
But that works till they start going to birthday parties and other events. Like, I've seen parents doing really, really well on the vegetable front, and the kids would eat broccoli and everything. But then, once kids have friends and when there's birthday parties, and it all goes out the window, because suddenly there's candy, there's ketchup, there's burgers, there's fries, and the whole vegetable diet, or even maybe protein-based but more sophisticated, goes out the window in no time.
Completely right, all over. But you bring up another important facet of private cookery is kids. That can be a sticking point, and it can be one of the most challenging aspects of when I said to you my role in London after 3 months, I sorted it out and everything was great. There was only one little hiccup after that, and the hiccup occurred when the baby's nanny had an accident and had to take off work. Previously, the nanny cooked for the baby, whereas suddenly I had to cook for the baby. And this was probably the only time afterwards that my relationship became a little bit rocky, was getting instructed to make a chicken and vegetable stew with no seasoning, and then getting criticized for the dish tasting like chicken, vegetables, and water. and I, well, obviously I did everything as instructed. I used water, chicken, and just a basic mirepoix, and I simmered it just lightly. I took it very seriously. I made sure the chicken was just poached. I added no salt, no sugar, no seasoning, no strong flavors. And then to sit there and get told that it tasted exactly like what it was, once again, you have to suspend everything and say, yes, I'm sorry, I'll do better next time. And you walk away and you think, well, I'm not Jesus. I'm these. Yeah, cooking. I've noticed. You see some advertisements from agencies, and they'll say no children. But it's a critical part. Is you've got to take the kids seriously, don't you? You've got to you've got to take them seriously. And I took it seriously because at that time I was about to become a parent, and I just thought to myself, I'm cooking for your kids. Okay, it's not really perhaps the things I want to be cooking, but these are your little kids, and I just felt that empathy, that I'm going to look after your kids the way I would look after my kids. And I think you can't treat it as a throwaway. Like you have to take everything as seriously. It's sure venison Wellington, cheese on toast. It's all the same in the private world. My wife teases me even to this day. So if I'm making peanut butter on toast for my boy, I butter that damn peanut butter to the perfect edge, and every time he has it, I still have that. I make sure that the peanut butter is perfectly even right to the crust. And she laughs.
It's a kitchen drama.
But you need to have an appreciation that I believe that you need to look at a steak sandwich is as credible as a venison Wellington. Cheese on toast, you need to take as seriously as a lobster. Everything must be taken seriously. You can't throw it away. And that can be hard perhaps for younger chefs or chefs that maybe have come from amazing restaurant backgrounds, that suddenly they've gone from cooking the highest caliber of cuisine in the world, and the next thing they're making a ham sandwich. And you must just think that every single thing you do, this is going to be the best damn ham sandwich, and the butter will be perfectly even. This will be perfection. That's my take on it, Hannes, anyway. And I appreciate, I love making pies. I love making those basic things, So for me, I think I started in the private game at an age where my aspirations for Michelin greatness had dissipated, and my love for food was still there. And yeah, so even to this day, I cook dinner every night, and I think that's the attitude when you're a private chef. Everything's important, and take everything seriously, and take all the complaints seriously. Like the ridiculous things, the ridiculous requests that you may think, oh my God, really? The things that are completely illogical. Listening and taking those things seriously goes a long way towards building a good relationship with your principal or your client, and forming trust. And if you can form trust, then you will, by and large, get some more freedom to perhaps cook things that you would like.
Yeah. What I'm hearing over your entire career, there's a lot of care, a lot of gratefulness, and a lot of grace in your career. And I think that kind of makes you a perfect but passionate private chef, because you come with a deep sense of care for you. You want to make sure that they feel taken care of, that they're pleased, that you strive through that level of perfection. And I think that's like a line that follows through your entire career. So I think that's something to worthwhile really highlight, because that sense of humbleness that you bring to the job, that wanting to be better tomorrow, wanting to learn, wanting to grow, wanting to adapt to the palate of the client. I think that's really what made the difference, or generally makes the difference, not only in your career, but in a career in the private chef industry. So I want to make sure, to acknowledge you for that, because it's such an amazing way of being, and being such a reflected chef the way you are is just commendable.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Thank you, Hannes. That's very kind. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
just
And I wanted to
it's just the way
thank
it
you
is.
for it. Yeah. That's just the way you are.
Thank you, though. It's very nice of you.
Yeah. And I wanted to thank you for taking the time, sharing your story with everybody and myself. It's been super interesting. I don't think you have any need to be more humble and not sharing your story, because I think it shares all the aspects of our industry, in so many different ways. It's just beautiful to listen to. For me, it was a beautiful conversation. So yeah, thanks again for sharing. And where can people connect with you?
Well, I'm really only on LinkedIn. I don't have a public profile. I generally just keep my head down, to be honest, Hannes, and always have. So I'm on LinkedIn because I found with LinkedIn I've been able to connect with some amazing people and learn things and get great advice. And it's not about showing off. Well, some people can, sure, but I love that I've been able to get some great advice and meet some great people like yourself. And I don't normally talk about myself at all. So I just thought I'd do this just because
That's what qualifies you for it.
Why not? Well, it was just something that resonated with me, in that the private chef world can give you a bit of a dream, and it can take you places. It can really take you and see some amazing things, and be someone like me who's maybe a journeyman chef. I didn't excel perhaps as much as I wanted to in restaurants, but jeepers, I've had an amazing life and seen some amazing things, worked with amazing ingredients, and it's, what more could you want? There is a great deal to be had from this career if you treat it right. And the private industry, wow. I just sort of hope that maybe my stories can inspire someone to say, yeah, I don't have to go work at a shitty cafe and have a terrible, boring life and don't see my friends. I can experience amazing things, meet amazing people, and have a great life. So I would like to see more happy chefs and a better industry. So yeah, that's why I did that. And
I love
thank you so much for the opportunity. It's really nice. Yeah, it's been great talking to you, and I'm 100% resonate with everything you said. So yeah, cool, man.
Thank you for joining us at the Private Chef podcast. If you know any highly skilled chefs that want to take their life to the next level, make sure to share this podcast with them. And if you enjoyed this episode, click subscribe and check out our upcoming episodes. Thank you for listening.